Imagine you're a 19-year-old college student. The police follow you home from school, asking questions, not about something that happened on campus, but about a more than 2-year-old murder you know nothing about. That's what Ryan Ferguson says happened to him almost 10 years ago. Now he's serving a 40-year sentence, and it was his friend pointing the finger at him. Tonight, Ryan opens up about his epic fight for freedom for our series, Crime and Punishment. 28-year-old Ryan Ferguson has spent almost all of his 20s in a maximum security prison. Hey, Ryan.
Man.
For a brutal murder he and now many others insist he didn't commit.
It's hard to have much hope at this point in the justice system based on what they've done.
But today he believes he could be days away from the phone call that could finally free him.
These judges don't decide to do what I think is obvious, what I think is the right thing. I might not ever have a chance to get my life back again.
And as we'll find out, there's not a shred of physical evidence linking him to the crime, and as of last year, not a single witness to implicate him. His incredible saga started 9 years ago.
So I was getting an education, I was moving forward in life, and there was nothing but open road.
A former Eagle Scout, he was a popular kid and extremely close with his family growing up in Columbia, Missouri.
This is one of the times when he was leaving, giving Bill a hug there. Even when he got into his teenage years, he'd be with a group of friends and he'd still come over and give us a big hug.
Leaving class one day, he was suddenly pulled over by police.
I lived about a mile away from the school, and there were these guys who were tailing me.
He was stunned to hear they were accusing him of a vicious murder that had occurred 2 years earlier on Halloween night. The victim? Beloved sports journalist and father of two, Kent Heitholt, who'd been bludgeoned and strangled in the parking lot of the Columbia Daily Tribune where he worked.
I think, well, I obviously prove I had nothing to do with that, so, question me for an hour and I go back, So it actually was a relief.
I was not there,
That relief faded fast. Ferguson was questioned for hours.
What the hell is going on?
And never wavered in his insistence that he had nothing to do with the murder.
I wasn't there. I didn't do anything.
So why was he arrested at all? Because hours earlier, in an interrogation room down the hall, this man, a classmate of Ryan's, told police a very different story, saying he and Ryan were responsible for that unsolved crime.
Whose idea was it?
It was Ryan's idea.
Ryan's idea.
Charles Erickson and Ryan had been out drinking that Halloween night in 2001 when Kent Heitholt was killed.
We had a few drinks, hung out, and then when the bar closed, I took Erickson home, and that was pretty much the night, like any other Halloween.
But years later, Erickson, who had a history of substance abuse, had started telling people, including Ryan, that he'd had a dream that he'd been at the crime scene the night of the murder.
He's clearly inebriated. He starts asking me if I know about him having anything to do with the murder of Kent Heitholt. And I'm looking at him like, I don't know anything about that, man. I know I took you home that night, but you even saying that is incredibly strange, and it's kind of freaking me out.
When he was interrogated by police, Erickson seemed confused, to say the least. He didn't seem to know how the murder occurred.
Or it's possible you may have choked him with something, is that right?
Yeah.
But you don't know what it was?
No.
Okay.
When he was brought to the scene, where it happened,
Does this look familiar to you?
I don't remember most of what happened.
or even what the murder weapon had been.
No, I think it was a shirt or something.
Yeah, well, I know it wasn't a shirt.
It's like maybe a bungee cord or...
Well, we know for a fact that his belt was ripped off of his pants and he was strangled with his belt.
Really?
You didn't put anything in your hand then?
No. I don't remember that at all.
But the detectives got aggressive, and Erickson eventually claimed that he and Ryan Ferguson had run out of drinking money and decided to rob someone.
You better start thinking very clearly.
Okay.
Because it's you that is on this chopping block.
Okay.
And I don't want to hear, all of a sudden I just think I maybe fabricated all this.
Ryan's dad, Bill Ferguson, has returned to the crime scene day after day to try to find any evidence to clear his son, including inconsistencies in Erickson's account. One of the most important points has been that Charles Erickson told some different stories about what happened. His first account was what?
Well, his first account was he and Ryan allegedly ran this way down the alley.
But the problem is that there were bloody footprints found going the other way.
Correct. But he didn't know that.
The state calls Charles Erickson.
But at the trial, Erickson somehow knew all those details that eluded him during the interrogation and was the star witness against Ryan Ferguson.
And he was down here and he had a belt and he had his foot on his back, on the victim's back, and he was pulling up on the belt like this.
That detailed account was supported by the testimony of a janitor named Jesse Trump, who identified Ferguson as one of two men he saw in the parking lot immediately after the murder.
Would you point to that individual or individuals, please?
Yes.
Erickson and Trump were the case against Ferguson because, after all, the DNA found at the scene, the footprints and fingerprints, none of it matched Ryan Ferguson. But it was enough for a jury to convict.
The jury found that defendant Ryan William Ferguson guilty of murder in the second degree.
But 4 years after that 2005 conviction, something remarkable happened that seemed to change everything. Erickson, who pled guilty in exchange for a 25-year sentence, reached out to Ryan.
May I call you Chuck?
Mr. Erickson or Charles.
Mr. Erickson.
I don't go by Chuck.
Okay.
Kathleen Zellner, an attorney who's won many wrongful conviction cases, agreed to take the case pro bono.
Ryan received a letter from Charles Erickson saying that Charles Erickson wanted Ryan's attorneys to come and meet with him.
With her camera rolling, Erickson read a statement admitting he had not been truthful in his testimony against Ryan.
Things happened much differently than I had previously stated. I regret now that I put an innocent man through that. He didn't deserve it.
Ryan got a new court hearing in April 2012, where Erickson testified that he'd lied about Ryan Ferguson during his trial.
Man, I've lied to everybody.
Would you state your full name for the record?
Jerry Dwight Trump.
And then the janitor, the only other eyewitness to implicate Ryan, took the stand and admitted that he too had lied at the trial. Convicted sex offender Jerry Trump said police pressured him to implicate two young men from a photo.
I'd like to have forgiveness from Ryan and his family.
At that point, do you think to yourself, we got to win?
Absolutely.
He's got to be released.
Absolutely. We were almost delirious.
And it didn't happen.
It did not happen.
Judge Daniel Green didn't believe Erickson's most recent account and found there wasn't enough reliable new evidence to overturn the conviction.
There is no case in the United States where a person has remained incarcerated when the only two witnesses against them have recanted.
It's very frustrating because we've found so much that helps prove my innocence. I don't know anything else you can say or do at that point.
Ryan appealed Judge Green's ruling, and finally, last month, during that argument, at least one of the three judges seemed to sympathize with Ryan's plight.
Is this case somewhat unique? In fact, I think very unique, in that Mr. Erickson's testimony was vigorously impeached at trial.
Hearing the appellate court arguments, are you now more hopeful than ever?
I am. And I really believe that they're going to do the right thing.
I believe these judges are going to correct this travesty now that they have the evidence that they needed to correct it.
In the meantime, Ryan has met someone special. I understand you have a girlfriend.
I do have a girlfriend, yeah. We had a lot of the same thoughts and beliefs and mentalities, so she was actually fairly local. So we decided to meet up and just talk and hang out.
How often do you get to see her?
I get to see her once a week, so it's certainly not ideal.
Hard as it is, Ryan's parents continue to try to stay positive for their son.
I come out of there thinking it is so strange every time, even after all this time, to have to leave without him. It's sad to think that he has lost all of his 20s. And it's hard to imagine how he's going to catch up on all of that, but I have no doubt that he will.
It seems almost the hardest part for you is in watching your family's pain.
Absolutely. They don't know if, these guys are beating me up every day and taking my food or whatever, Could be taking something far worse than food.
Now, nearly 10 years later, Ryan is finally allowing himself to imagine a life outside the prison bars. When do you expect to be released from prison?
Before Thanksgiving.
Out before Thanksgiving?
I can't believe I have to laugh saying that. Yeah, I do. Pleasure meeting you guys. Thank you. I just maintain positivity and hope that one day I'll wake up and I'll get a good phone call.